Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Trusted Trustee podcast. And as usual, I'm joined by the lovely Tracey Besters in the New South Wales Southern Highlands. How are you going, Tracey?
I'm really well, Darin, and it's a little bit like an overcast Southern Highlands today. It feels like we're sitting in the fog. So,
Oh, we're overcast here in Sydney too with rain, no respite either way if you're in New South Wales to escape this fairly miserable weather. But obviously, before we get started, this podcast is sponsored and it's brought to you by Super Fund Property Valuations. Take the tension out of tax time by making Super Fund Property Valuations your number one choice for all your SMSF property valuation requirements. With compliance becoming more important than ever, you need the team with a 100% track record of auditor and ATO satisfaction. Their service is tailored for SMSFs to provide market-leading turnaround times and prices. Order a report today by filling in your details on the online form at www.superfundpropertyvaluations.com.au and let Superfund Property Valuations take care of the hard work. And I know I always bang on about this, but it is so true that valuations are certainly an area of intense scrutiny by the ATO, so you really don't want to get this wrong. If you do, it's very easy to make an error, and the onus of information that they're looking for seems to build every time I see a presentation for the SMSF sector. So you can take it to the bank that this isn't going away anytime soon. So make sure you get them right. And of course, Superfund Property Valuations can obviously help in that process. So today, Tracey, I believe we're going to talk about related parties and related party transactions with SMSS, which is always a bit of a contentious issue, isn't it? Because, it obviously limits what you can and can't do as far as certain acquisitions and strategies and setups as well for an SMSF. So, and they're really important because obviously one error, like anything else in the SMSF world, one error leads to a whole myriad of flow-on effects that will obviously put you in a little bit of hot water when you're running your own super fund.
yeah, absolutely, Darin. And I think that related parties is something that at face value seems like it should be really straightforward and really simple. Like, yeah, I know who I'm related to. That's easy, But it's all of kind of the little like idiosyncrasies around, the Part 8 associates rule. And we refer to it as Part 8 associates because that's the section of the superannuation laws that deal with this particular related party issues. But it's important for two aspects. One around, well, acquisition of assets from a member or their related parties. And, we've been talking about property investment and transferring property into a super fund, and can you actually do that? And so this whole concept around related parties is really important from that perspective, but also it's important from the perspective of what are called in-house assets, which we're going to lead on to in our next podcast. So we've got to understand the concept of related parties before we can even talk about in-house assets.
Yeah, very intricate and, as usual, intertwined issue, this whole concept of related parties. So why don't we start with from the letter A, basically, and that is who actually is considered a related party. And as you said just a minute ago, it's not actually as straightforward as you might think.
No, exactly. So let's start with who is a related party of the SMSF. So let's start there because that's probably letter A, and that's probably the simplest part of it. So a related party of the SMSF is the members of the SMSF. So that's number one, the members of the SMSF. It's also the standard employer sponsor of the fund. And now that's kind of an old term that we don't hear thrashed around too much these days. So let's just park that. We won't go into any more detail on that, but it is the employer sponsor of the fund, old term. And also it's a Part 8 associate of a member. So if we do a little diagram, and if you can imagine it like a piece of paper, and in the middle of the piece of paper, you write your name, then we actually expand out from there. You kind of get this web of people who are considered your Part 8 associates, or entities that are considered your Part 8 associates. But in terms of the super fund, who is a related party of the super fund? Member, standard employer sponsor, and the Part 8 associates of the members of the fund. So that's point A.
Yep. Okay. So that's the first layer of the onion that we've
Yes.
taken care of. I suppose logically, the next thing is going to be, what are Part 8 associates?
Perfect question, Darin. Perfect question. So let's talk about Part 8 associates. So the first layer of Part 8 associates is a relative of the member. So again, think about you in the center of the circle. Who are your relatives? And the legislation defines that a little bit further, right? So a relative is, and I'm going to read this so I don't forget one, a parent, grandparent, a brother, a sister, an uncle, an aunt, a nephew, a niece, a child or lineal descendant of yours, an adopted child of you, or of your spouse. So it's all of those people, and then the spouses of all of those people.
Right. So I
So it's quite
suppose
encompassing.
it is quite encompassing, but I suppose perhaps to simplify it, a rule of thumb might be just think immediate family, but
Yes,
I suppose you could say extended immediate family, because sometimes people just think immediate family is my wife and my children. Well,
correct.
it's slightly extended immediate family because it really encompasses your parents as
Yeah,
well, and
yeah,
your siblings as well, and their offspring as well.
yes,
So
that's
it's
right.
that
Yeah.
whole extended family web that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it is, Darin. And that's why you kind of, I've had many situations over the years where I've literally had to draw a diagram on a piece of paper, and it fills the whole piece of paper, because we're only talking about people at the moment. We're talking about human beings at the moment. We haven't even got into the entities side of things. But one of the the complicated parts about this Part 8 associates and the definition of relatives is where we have blended families as well. So because yes, it's your immediate family or your lineal family, if you want to call them that, but then it's also your step family as well. So you've got to then go, well, my parents are divorced and remarried, so then I need to take into consideration their spouses, and then go from their spouses down, and their kind of, extended parts there. So when we're trying to say my cousin's brother's sister's ex-wife from down the road kind of thing, it really almost encompasses that, doesn't it? So
It kind of reminds me of a situation where in your working life, when you start off, your I don't know, interconnection with whatever industry you're in is limited to your first job. But then as you go on to a second job, or your first colleagues move on to another job themselves, that web and that sort of network extends to other entities and other individuals and other parties as you go along your working life. It's a little bit the same as that, isn't it? But in this situation, obviously, not only your personal life, but potentially other people's personal lives as well. Because if,
yeah,
again, that extended family concept, whatever happens in their personal life is going to affect how you look at related parties or Part 8 associates in terms of your super fund. Now, I know that that sounds ridiculously removed in a lot of ways. I mean, hell, if your sister or your brother remarries, you're not going to be thinking, oh, what impact will that have on my SMSF? But maybe you should, because it will potentially have implications. And we all know that, you know, close-knit families at one point in time, they do discuss business opportunities and investment opportunities together. That is really not beyond the realms of possibility. In fact, that's probably more common than not.
Yeah.
So, while we may be a little bit flippant about how far the octopus tentacles extend, when it comes to the application of the law, it's extremely important to get it
Mm.
right.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is, Darin. And I think, when I've had clients over the years that have come to me and they'll say something along the lines of, I want to buy this investment property and I want my super fund to buy this investment property. And if it's a business real property, then obviously we'll go down that path that we've discussed on a previous podcast. But if it's just a normal residential investment, it's not going to fit within that business real property definition. So therefore, at face value, you go, well, can I acquire it by the super fund or not? Then you've actually got to think about, well, who are you acquiring the property from? Because we know that we're prohibited from acquiring a property from a related party.
yeah,
So this is where this kind of discussion around the part 8 associates comes in. And if you're buying, a property that's listed on realestate.com and, you don't know the people who own it, then you're probably fine. But yeah, there are all of ways, these backyard deals at barbecues where people have, I've got a property to sell. Oh, I want to buy that property. I want my super fund to buy that property. Can I actually do it? So that's where it becomes kind of, this discussion around, well, what is a Part 8 associate? And that's at the acquisition time. So, what does that look like? And I think that over the years when I've had the conversations and we've started to draw out these diagrams, we've had a bit of a chuckle because it is quite funny when you start to go down the path of, well, who are my cousins and who are they married to? And, how far do we actually go with this? Who are my nieces and nephews and my aunts and uncles and everything else? So you do have to actually kind of keep unfolding that and unlayering that to get to, well, have we actually considered everybody? So it is quite a fun exercise to do.
yeah. I like your definition of fun. So we've peeled off another layer of the onion there. Why don't we navigate the waters of related entities or how entities fit into this whole tangled web?
Yeah. Great leading to that. So, okay, we've talked about individuals. So let's now talk about entities. So the other part of the Part 8 associates is a partnership. So if you're in a partnership with somebody else, then that partnership becomes a Part 8 associate of yours and therefore related party to the super fund. So partnership, you would think in a general business trading perspective, oh, I'm not in a partnership with anybody. But wait a second, there's always a but. Wait a second, do you own a rental property with somebody else? Because if you own a rental property with another person, then that is a tax law partnership. So you've then got a partnership arrangement. So although you might not be related from a family perspective to that other person, if you and I owned a rental property together, Darin, we're now Part 8 associates for the purposes of the SMSF rules. So that's kind of another layer of the complication that comes in here.
Wow, that's again, we're not trying to make fun of the situation, but as you so poignantly pointed out, Tracey, that on face value you might just think because partnership is a fairly broad term, I suppose you could say.
Yes.
So if you're talking about partnership, a lot of people would immediately think business partner. Well, I don't have a business partner. So how can anything I do with my SMSF be considered doing a transaction with a Part 8 associate in terms of a partner if I don't have a business partner? But you have to really look through the microscope of all of the relationships that you have, not only
Yeah.
personal, but professional or investment relationship, to
Yes.
actually unpick these rules to see whether or not, okay, have I ticked every single box to make sure that this transaction's okay? And it's not really an easy, as you can already probably see from our brief discussion already, that's not necessarily an easy exercise to complete.
That's right, Darin. And so then it goes a little bit further. So when we're talking still about the partnership, then you've got to say, okay, well, that person that I'm in partnership with because I own this investment with that person, what about their spouse? What about their children? So then you've got that layer as well. So it's the partnership and that person, plus then all of their family, in terms of their, their side of things as well. So got to kind of bring that back into the mix. So I think we're up to an A3 sheet of paper now, not just an A4
Yeah.
sheet of paper.
Yeah. I think it's probably bigger than an A3 sheet of paper, Tracy.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wall next to me and I'm starting to think, yeah, I could probably fill most of that wall with a diagram of what we've just discussed. So
Yeah.
is there any extension now to more related parties that we've got to think about? And
There
of
is.
course, part of the difficulty here is that sometimes when you're looking to acquire an asset, say perhaps, or complete a transaction or put a strategy together in an SMSF, there can be a little bit of urgency attached to it. We've got to move on this straight away now, Trace, or we'll miss the opportunity. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very common conversation that people have.
Yeah.
But this sort of stuff takes time. So,
Yeah.
so take that into account as well, that it's not just as easy as, oh yeah, we'll just look at all of this stuff. Think about the context of the urgency where sometimes you want to acquire, maybe there's a property or something like that, and you think that, well, I know that there's been several bids for this property. If we don't get our finances together and put in a proper sort of offer for it, it'll be gone. And
Mm.
I've had my heart set on this because I think it's a really good investment property for my super fund. Uh, but then, have you considered all of these related party issues? And that already slows down a bit of the process. It's necessary, obviously. It's a necessary compliance step to take, but it's not even as easy as what we're spelling out in the context of how these things unfold. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, that's true, Darin. And I remember saying to you once before that most accountants in the country and advisors have probably had that kind of 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon or 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon phone call where, are we going to auction tomorrow, by the way? I want to do this in my super fund. And it's kind of like, whoa, wait a second, wait a second. There's a few things to do before that. And I think it's about, and one of the reasons we do this podcast is to help to educate and empower trustees of self-managed super funds so that they understand some of the intricacies that are, sitting within the SMSF world, so that they know that, there are some steps involved and there are some considerations that need to be, thought about to make sure that we don't have this big kind of like, no deal Red Cross sort of thing happening with a particular investment that, yes, they have their heart set on. Yes, they want to buy that particular property from their mate down the road who actually happens to be a Part 8 associate.
Yeah.
So, it's really important we get it right because of the breaches and the ramifications of not getting it right. Means the whole thing would have to be undone. And then we've got actual contraventions of the superannuation laws, and nobody wants to go down that path.
No, absolutely not. Now, are there any other layers of the onion that we have to strip away before, we've properly covered off who you need to be conscious of potentially being a related party?
Yeah, there are more layers. We're only partway through of this unlayering of the onion analogy. So, and this is probably where it gets most complicated, I think. So, Part 8 associates then goes further and it says a company that is sufficiently influenced by or in which a majority voting interest is held by an individual or that individual's Part 8 associates. So remember, we've got this massive diagram on your wall. Okay. And then we've got you're part of a company, or you're a shareholder or a director of a trustee company that is the trustee for a trust. So then we have to look at, okay, what other relationships do you have? What other directorships and ownerships do you have in these other entities? And do you, Darin, do you have sufficient influence to control that particular company, which could be a trustee company, or do you have a majority voting interest? So we've got to kind of think about that. Now, okay, if you're the only director and the only shareholder of that company, then you would be pretty safe to say that you would have control or sufficient influence. So I think that
You'd
one's
want to
pretty
think
obvious.
so.
You would think so, right? Discount that split personality thing going on. I think we're pretty
Yes.
safe to say. All right. If you have, 3 shareholders and 3 directors, then you would be fairly safe to say at face value, you don't have control because you've got 3 parties. However, where you've got 2 parties, or even 3 parties, and you're the casting vote person, or you're the chairman of the voting, and you get to have a say if there's a stalemate, then to me, that kind of is then erring on the side of sufficiently influenced or controlling the votes. So you've got to be really careful where you've got a 50-50 situation. So if you and I, we're in a company together, you have 50%, I have 50%, you're a director, I'm a director. What happens if there's a stalemate? Who actually has a
Yeah.
casting vote, and who
Yeah.
actually then says, well, I'm going to break the stalemate because we're not going to get anything done here. And I
Yeah.
don't see too many constitutions that actually allow a stalemate, because what's the point of that? It'll say
Yeah.
that somebody will have a casting vote or somebody will be able to break that stalemate. Obviously, it's not quite as colloquial as that in the terminology, but that's what it means. So if you're the person who has the casting vote, or you're the chairman, you get to break that stalemate, then you are on the side of sufficiently influenced. So therefore, that company and the assets of that trust, if that company is a trustee, that company and trust would then be a related party of yours and of the super fund. If you're the one that doesn't have the casting vote, then you're kind of home free, if you like. But if you've got the casting vote, then that's going to be caught in this web of Part 8 associates. So that's really kind of an interesting concept where you've got just a 2-person or 2-family or 2-party kind of company or trust. Where you've got 3, again, if you're breaking that stalemate, because you're the one, party A is against, party B is for, and you're party C, then, you'd have to just start to think about whether you are actually having that sufficient influence. Or then, can we go a step further?
Well, I think we have to go a step further because this whole concept of significant influence, I think you've laid out the face value case of what most people would probably think about. So you're talking about equal share in an entity or whatever. And that's probably what we normally look at. I've got a 50-50 share in this. I've got a 1/3 stake in this. I've got a 25% stake in this. But it's actually a little bit more nuanced as far as that goes. And there have been rulings on this whereby, I might say, oh, it's all right. It's even split. And I think in some cases it might not even have been an even split, but it's actually been determined that, yeah, but that's just on the surface.
Yeah.
We've had a look at the way the entity runs, and basically, forget about how many shares he's got or what stake he's got in the entity. Basically, whatever Darin says goes,
Yeah.
right? Your history of decision making has been, oh, he said to do this, and that's the direction the entity has gone in. That is, regardless of any shareholding or any sort of percentage of the pie that you have, that in itself also can be considered significant influence or whatever the term is, isn't it, Tracey? And boy, that's actually a complicated process.
Yeah, exactly, Darin. And that's where I wanted to go with it. Because it really is, we can have, and we all know situations, we've all heard of situations where on paper, yes, it's 50-50. And so it looks like, you say yes, I say yes, you say no, I say no, you say yes, I say no, like it's, straightforward. But where it is that sufficient influence, and what's the definition of that? We'd have to go into case law and all sorts of things, but
Yeah.
what's the definition of sufficient influence? influence, where you are always acting the way that the other person says. Maybe it's because they have seniority to you. Maybe they're a mentor of yours. Maybe they're, someone that you have followed for a long time, and therefore, you are quite happy to be guided by what they think is the best thing because they have more experience than you do. There could be various reasons why you might actually just go along with it. You might be just an easy-go-lucky kind of person and go, yeah, no worries, I'm happy to say yes. But you kind of have to come back to, well, why are you making those decisions? If it is shown that, or if it's proven that that you're making those decisions because that other person is influencing you to do so, then yeah, you're in the red alert kind of territory in terms of Part 8 associates here. And then I kind of think that for me, and the kind of discussions I've had with my clients over all of these years is around if you have a two-person company, or two directors, two shareholders, then you might want to consider having an independent arbitrator, an independent third party that comes in to break that stalemate wherever that stalemate occurs, just so you can actually help to support this argument of not having that company as a Part 8 associate. Now, why does it matter? Why does it matter? It doesn't really matter for the majority of SMSFs, Darin. It doesn't really matter for the majority. Like, not many SMSFs, I guess, are going to say, well, I want to buy a property from a related party, or I want to invest in or loan money to a related party, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to do that. However, we wouldn't be having this conversation of podcasts if we're only talking about, all of the plain vanilla discussions, because that would be really boring. So, so it comes into the situation where you have got these deals that are being made, and you have got these investments that are not, just the same plain vanilla investments that everyone else is doing. So it certainly raises its head, probably more often than we realize.
No, I totally agree with that. And if you join a few dots together, what's one of the most popular asset classes within an SMSF? It's property.
Of course it is.
Property takes a significant amount of capital to commit to actually acquiring that. And sometimes it means the individual can't come up with that capital themselves. What's a good way to do it? Let's see if Tracey wants to get in on this deal, then we can pool our resources and actually acquire that property, and we can both benefit from that.
Yeah.
That's not a foreign conversation at all in the context of not only SMSS, but I'm sure outside of SMSS too, involving a property purchase. So it's not, you can kind of maybe laugh it off in terms of, oh, well, that's all right. All I do is acquire shares. So that's pretty vanilla. Yeah, it is pretty vanilla. And really, depending upon your capital commitment, you're pretty much in control of that. If you want to buy a larger illiquid or clunky asset, this is the potential path that you're going to head down. And it's certainly something that you must be conscious of. Because I know we're not going to go into it today, but the compliance issues that you face by getting this wrong is a whole other world of pain that you really don't want to expose yourself to.
Yeah, 100%, Darin. And I think that, just there are more and more, as property has become more and more expensive as well, to get into those property investments has become a bigger hurdle. So, people are looking for other ways to be able to jump that hurdle and, to be able to get that investment that they want to. And, it would be really silly not to ask, can my super fund be involved? That would be a silly thing to just assume that it can't be. So you want to ask the question about whether it can be involved. And, there's been many structures that, I've been involved in over the years around, well, we have had super funds and family trusts and individuals and, a whole myriad of entities involved in these structures. And successfully, they've been able to go ahead and make that property investment. And it has worked out really well. So, but if we didn't go through this process around, well, who is a related party? We've drawn this diagram. I had a really big whiteboard in my boardroom to be able to draw these diagrams. But you wouldn't be able to get to the decision-making process that yes or no that super fund can be involved in. So if we just recap on that company and the sufficient influence side of things, Darin, because I don't want to leave our listeners and viewers with a misconception. One person is definitely going to be an issue. Two people involved, more of an issue. Three people, less of an issue, but still just think about, how those decisions are made. And if there's one party that's always breaking the stalemate, then, is that because that person has sufficient influence to be able to do that? So just the three people is much easier to manage. 4, 5 people, much easier to manage, only from Part 8 associates, of course. If you get more people involved, it's actually more difficult than easier. But in terms of do we fit within this Part 8 associate side of things, the more parties, the less likely you're going to fit into that Part 8 associates, except for if you then have, let's say you have 4 parties involved, but, 2 of them are Part 8 associates on their own, and these 2 are Part 8 associates on their own. Well, actually, you don't have 4 individual parties involved any longer. From a Part 8 associate rule, you've only got 2. So you've got to think about, how does that actually work at a shareholder or unit holder level?
Yeah, it's complicated and obviously a topic that we will continue to explore because guess what, Trace? We've run out of time today.
How unusual.
So intricate, this issue, that I feel like we've only really just scratched the surface. And for the listeners and the viewers out there, if you're kind of scratching your head as if to say, oh, well, yeah, okay, so there's these rules. What's the big deal? If you continue to listen to the next episode, you'll find out what the big deal is, because it is a big deal. And you'll probably walk away from that one thinking, oh, geez, I really don't want to breach those rules because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. And it's a substantial rabbit hole.
It really is, Darin. And, so we will be talking about the whole concept of in-house assets. And so, we've really, in a lot of the examples today, I guess, we've talked about acquiring the asset and the investing in to start with. But we're going to actually now take it one step further. And that's what I love about the SMSF space, is because we can always take it one step further. It's fun. So we're going to be talking about what is an in-house asset and some of the kind of examples that the ATO have used in one of their SMSF rulings that kind of might make you go, oh, I wouldn't have thought that actually was caught up in some of the in-house asset rules. And what does that mean for my SMSF and what can I be aware of? So excited to do that one. That'll be fun.
Same logic as who's a related party, eh?
Yeah,
I wouldn't
exactly.
have thought they were a related party, but hey, yeah, they are.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
probably a good note to end it on today. So the only thing that's left to do is thank Tracey for her time, your time. It's been a great discussion as usual.
Yeah, thanks so much, Darin, and I look forward to doing the next podcast with you.
Thanks to my production team as well. But most importantly, thanks to you, the listeners, viewers, for your support. Again, we hope you get as much information out of these podcasts as possible and also enjoy the content as much as we enjoy bringing it to you. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Other than that, thanks again to Tracey, and we'll see you the next time we bring you the Trusted Trustee podcast. Bye for now.
Bye for now.